They're now just one seat away from a majority government, and the Liberals continue to tease the possibility of more floor crossers. Today, reporters asked Energy Minister Tim Hodgson about his role in taking Michael Maw from the Conservatives and what else could be coming.
Our Prime Minister is a former businessman and a pragmatist. I'm a former businessman and a pragmatist. Michael Maw is a former businessman and a pragmatist.
One away from a majority now. Do you think you can convince more to come over? Is there some people ready to defect?
Let's say I'm getting lots of inquiries.
Well, yesterday, the CBC's Rosemary Barton asked Conservative Leader Pierre Poilievre about the crossings and if it was a problem of his leadership.
No, it's a problem of Mark Carney's leadership that after Canadians clearly rejected a costly Liberal majority, because they knew it would mean higher grocery prices and higher food costs. He is trying to manipulate his way through backroom deals to get that majority. My message to Mark Carney is that if you want a costly majority government to drive up taxes and deficits, then you have to go to the Canadian people and have them vote for it, not do it by dirty backroom deals.
Okay, for an expert look at both parties' floor crossing strategies, we've assembled the Council of Davids. We've got David Herle. He was the chief campaign strategist for the federal Liberals under Paul Martin. And here in the studio is David McLaughlin. He was the chief of staff to former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. And of course, you know, you can't have two, you got to have three. David McLaughlin, let's start with that answer to Rosie's question there from Pierre Poilievre. That's basically saying it's not me, it's Kearney. That's the problem.
Yeah, it doesn't work. I mean, look, it doesn't resonate at all. The people are leaving his caucus, the floor crossers that we've seen, and they've cited Mr. Poilievre's leadership. So, you know, you have to accept that that's the reality of it. This spin won't get you out of this stuff. You just have to, I mean, he has to weather the storm, weather this dynamic through to his own leadership vote. But I think he'd be in much better position if he said, look, I'm a conviction politician, I'm a principled politician, and I'm not going to change what I think is right for Canada and our party. These folks don't share that. Well, that's fine. But that's a more principled and I think a more plausible stance for him to take. But this idea of trying to shift the blame to his political opponent is just kind of whingy, and I don't think it's going to work, and I think he should look for something else.
David Herle, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think, it's unquestionably good news for the government as it rolls out, because a government that's trying to do the kind of ambitious things that this government is, many of which will not be popular at the time that they're done, be much better off with a majority than with a minority situation that they have. I mean, I think to the question about Mr. Poilievre's answer, I mean, he's in the kind of grave denial he has to be if you want to continue on in his job. I mean, what are the realities for people that are in his caucus? First of all, he's not a charming guy one-on-one interaction, so it's not necessarily pleasant to be in his caucus. Second of all, I don't think that him and the leadership like Scheer are setting a great sort of role for members of parliament to play. They have to repeat talking points. They've got to be angry all the time. They can't be constructive. And then lastly, and pretty importantly, probably a lot of these people signed up to be candidates when they assumed they were going to be part of a government.
Right.
And when they assumed Poilievre was going to win. And now that they're not part of a government, and now that it looks like Poilievre may not be the best route to win another election, but is determined to stay, all those factors probably do have quite a few people thinking about their futures over there. And the fact that McKinnon and Hodgson are saying it, I think, is deeply unsettling to the Conservative caucus.
Well, David McLaughlin, on that, when Tim Hodgson says, I'm getting a lot of inquiries, maybe that's true, maybe it's not, but it sounds like we should begin our hunt with people who were former businessmen and pragmatists, because that's what he seems to think they're looking for. Do you think this is just trolling, or do you think they're just gloating that they know they've got something potentially coming soon?
It's all of the above, right? There's no question they're trying to sow more dissension and a bit of disinformation in order to make the Conservatives feel uncomfortable. That serves their purposes, for now. But also, it's sending a signal that, look, we're open for for business if you do in fact want to cross the floor. I mean, it's one more really matters. Then they get to this majority, and so at this point, why would they sort of let up? So I think that does put the Conservatives and Mr. Poilievre in particular in a very invidious position of trying to, make a case for themselves to go forward in terms of dealing with the Liberal government while sort of fending off really what is still the backlash from the loss in the last election, which David pointed out. I mean, that's really the story here, is that they weren't expected to lose. They did lose. It's a completely different dynamic. Mr. Poilievre, as a long-term opposition leader, feels different to caucus members than Mr. Poilievre about to become Prime Minister.
Yeah, no, it's a totally different internal calculation that goes on. But, David, just to flip it around to the other side, sorry, David Herle, got to be very clear in these conversations. If Mark Carney gets a majority through defections rather than elections, does that matter to Canadians? Do you think people might look at that a little bit strange and have some issues with it? Because that will be, that's already there as an attack point from the Conservatives. What do you think?
I'm not as certain about that as I would like to be as a Liberal, because first of all, I just finished reading the Jim Coots diaries, and they effectively end with his attempt to win a by-election in Toronto by having the existing member appointed to the Senate, and everything backfired on them. And it's a reminder that Canadians don't like political games. And certainly Mark Carney was not elected to do that. And I like Mark Carney and Tim Hodgson much more on television when they are doing things that look like they're building Canada than when they're playing these kinds of things. They look different to me, and I like the other look a lot better. But most people will tell you no, David. Most people will tell you that there isn't going to be a price to be paid for this, and certainly that the upside of gaining a majority is much greater than whatever risk there is. I think that's probably true, but I wish I felt more certain about it.
Yeah, David McLaughlin, your thoughts on that? Because I've asked this question sort of nonstop since Thursday, and boy, I get a lot of hate mail about it, but I wonder about this, right? Because, the outcome was the outcome. It was a strong Liberal mandate, but it was a strong Liberal minority mandate, and now it could turn into a majority one. What are your thoughts?
I don't think it matters a hill of beans in the end.
There you go. I told you.
Yeah.
I'm more certain than compadre David Herle here. Look, I think people will put that behind them when it comes to voting the next time out, and there's probably going to be a bit of space anyways. But here's an analog case. What happens when people have an election? When an election is called, that people say they didn't want it, or they didn't expect it, or that it looks like the governing party is trying to score advantage. It's never an issue that percolates all the way through to E-Day. So these things have a natural sort of cycle in that, and people may not like them. I think David is right. They don't like political games. On the other hand, he was so close to a majority. They may say, well, look, just a little bit more, et cetera, and it gets them there. And for now, people are more liking the Carney government and its agenda and its way of governing than not. So if that changes, and they're into a darker period where the public has turned on them a bit, and then they're trying to bring people over to keep themselves stable from having to go to the people on a vote, then I think the voters will have a different opinion. But for now, no harm, no foul kind of thing.
So David Herle, where does this all leave Mr. Poilievre? Like the parties are neck and neck, kind of where they've been for a while now, but he's underwater on his leadership, and he's gone from invincible and inevitable to twice defeated and now 2 defections. I mean, where does he stand going into this review next month in Calgary?
You know what? I'm going to say I don't think Pierre Poilievre is going to be the leader of the Conservative Party in the next election. And I think that he will survive the review vote at his convention, because I think he's stacking that convention and the Ontario Conservatives are sitting it out.
Right.
But, they've got the Chong rule in their caucus, which they can employ at any time. And so normally what you would say is, your people are reacting badly to your leadership. People are strongly preferring Carney's leadership. And at the end of the day, that leadership difference will be decisive in an election campaign. What can you change about that? The problem is that, as we saw with Rosie Barton, it's his essential character. It's who he is. And I don't know that he can change that, at least not credibly. So I think he's going to continue to do badly in the form of public opinion until finally his caucus makes a change.
David McLaughlin, your thoughts on that, because there is a component of the Conservative movement base that wants this type of leader. They want him to stay that way. And that's enough to get you to a high level, but not enough to put you over the top.
And it's why the caucus matters in this instance. So as David said, look, the caucus can employ the Chong rule at any time, but it's how he manages caucus and talks with them, to them, and with them through this period that is his best long-term, or will be the most determining factor in his longer-term success. He will win the leadership review, I predict, quite handily. It's afterwards, in that longer runway to an election, and the only folks that can then determine his future are the caucus. And so how he responds to this now will help lay the seeds for either the caucus coming together, cohering around him, because they say, look, I like him, I like working with him, or he listens to me, all of those kinds of things, which appear to be a bit of a challenge. We hear from some folks, as David said, but that's where his longer-term future stands. So he's got to work with the caucus now, because I think at the end of the day, if he's not leader, it's because the caucus made that choice, not the party. And that'll bring other kinds of challenges for the party leading into another election. But he's not in any kind of guaranteed outcome at this state of affairs. That's why this sort of bleeding that we're seeing is really, and look, it's just not good any way you cut it for him.
Okay, we got about 60 seconds left.
I agree. It's not relations with the caucus. It's convincing the caucus that he's a winner.
Yes, and there's winning the leadership, and then there's winning the prime ministership, and those are two very different ball games, right?
Absolutely.
So look, we got about 60 seconds left. David Herle, first to you. Every Liberal you talk to, they're pretty convinced they've got somebody else or others on the hook. Every Conservative you talk to also is convinced of it. Is it better or worse for Mr. Poilievre, should this be true, if it happens before the leadership review or after the leadership review? Because if he gets locked in and then Carney locks in a majority, I don't know. What are your thoughts on those scenarios?
Well, it's a bit of a pick your poison, David, but I would, if I was him, much prefer that all of this crap comes out before the review.
Yeah.
And that the review is a reset for his leadership. An endorsement after all that has happened still gets endorsed. He's able to say, okay, we've got those people that didn't want to be with us. They're gone. Now we all want to be together. Let's go forward. That's, I think, the way I would like to have it, but it's not good either way.
David McLaughlin?
From Mr. Poilievre's perspective, I think David Herle is right. You want to get this out of the way and then, say, look, I've got all that endorsement going forward. And that from the Liberals' perspective, if they want to run against Poilievre next time out and you can actually game this through, then do it afterwards, because that's will give you a little bit more maneuverability and put the Conservatives a bit in Dutch, as they say.
Okay. Gentlemen, always appreciate the time. Always appreciate the insights. David McLaughlin, David Herle, thank you so much.